Prohibition is the action of forbidding something by law. Prohibition started in the 1920s, in which people were not allowed to manufacture, sell, or transport liquor. After the American Revolution, drinking was on the rise. Societies were organized as part of the temperance movement. This movement tried to get people to slow down their drinking. At first, this movement attempted to get people to drink in moderation, but after several decades, the movement changed their focus to stop drinking completely. By the beginning of the 20th century, there was temperance organizations in almost every state. The temperance movement blamed alcohol for many of society's problems, especially crime and murder. In 1919, the 18th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which prohibited the sale and manufacture of alcohol, was ratified. It went into effect on January 16, 1920. While the 18th Amendment established prohibition, the Volstead Act, which was passed on October 28, 1919, which clarified the law. Prohibition made a lot of people furious. Many people found ways to get around the law and still get their liquor. Some societies came up with clever ways on how to transport the liquor and consume it. Some ways were through speakeasies, bootleggers, and gangs. This led to organized crime as we know it today. One of the most notorious gangsters in the 1920s was Al Capone. He was a very dangerous man with a lot of resources and power. He was a big factor when it came to organized crime. Capone had many men to do his dirty work for him, but when it came to the business side of liquor, he was your man. He used the same type of business model that Andrew Carnegie used in the steel industry. Almost immediately after the 18th Amendment went into effect, some organizations attempted to repeal it. The temperance movement failed, and more people wanted to bring liquor back. The anti-prohibition movement gained strength in the 1920s. It said that alcohol consumption was a local problem and should not be in the Constitution. The stock market crash in 1929 and the beginning of the Great Depression started to change people's opinion about alcohol. People needed jobs and the government needed money. If alcohol was legal again, new jobs would open up for citizens and sales tax for the government. On December 5, 1933, the 21st Amendment to the Constitution was ratified. The 21st Amendment repealed the 18th Amendment, which made alcohol legal again. It was the first time an amendment to the U.S. Constitution was repealed. A vast majority of Americans were glad that alcohol was back.
In 1920, the 18th Amendment went into effect, banning the manufacture, sale, and distribution of intoxicating liquors. The Prohibition era had begun. It was the result of a long, hard-fought campaign by the Dries, as the Anti-Saloon League, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and other prohibition advocates were known. They considered alcohol to be America's national curse and believed a federal ban would help lower crime rates, strengthen families, and generally improve the national character. But the noble experiment, as it came to be known, would last little more than a decade. What went wrong? For one thing, Prohibition turned out to be bad for the economy. Thousands of jobs were eliminated when breweries, distilleries, and saloons were shut down. Despite grand expectations that banning alcohol would boost sales of other goods and entertainment, the result was the opposite. Restaurants couldn't make enough money without liquor sales, and theater revenues actually declined. The federal government lost valuable excise tax revenue to the tune of some $11 billion. At the same time, it spent more than $300 million to enforce the ban. And we bet you didn't know that it was never actually illegal to drink during Prohibition. The 18th Amendment bans manufacture, sale, and distribution of alcohol, not its consumption. People certainly didn't stop drinking, but they did start buying more illegal liquor. Bootleg alcohol was often of lesser quality and sometimes even dangerous. On average, 1,000 Americans died every year during Prohibition from the effects of drinking tainted liquor. And what about the idea that banning alcohol would cut down on crime? In fact, crime rates actually rose during Prohibition. In addition to gangsters like Al Capone, who made around $60 million annually from his bootleg operations, the illegal alcohol trade made criminals out of millions of formerly law-abiding Americans, including police officers or Prohibition agents tempted by lucrative bribes. By the end of the 1920s, the majority of Americans were losing patience with Prohibition. Franklin D. Roosevelt won the presidency in 1932 with a platform that pledged to end it. In 1933, the 21st Amendment repealed the ban on alcohol. It was the first time in history that a constitutional amendment had ever been repealed. Some say FDR toasted the end of Prohibition with his favorite drink, a dirty martini. A few states remained dry after the repeal, but by 1966, all of them had abandoned Prohibition, and America raised its glass to the end of the noble experiment. In 1920, the 18th Amendment went into effect, banning the manufacture, sale, and distribution of intoxicating liquors. The Prohibition era